to 6 p.m. rather than 7. And the reason for that is when we have our guest speakers, especially, for instance, like tonight, Pastor Carson, they're 3 hours ahead of us. And so we don't want it to be an inconvenience to them, and we appreciate and respect their time. And so not only will there be people joining in, but this is, as Pastor Barker mentioned, it is recorded, and we have people that watch this. Some will watch it tonight, then others watch it throughout. And we're really, really excited because this is a resource for people. This is men and women, young people that are just starting. We have people that are seasoned. We have people that have been in this a long time, and they're just champions of the local church, and they're serving. And every one of us are doing our absolute best to help in the local church and help our district. And so this is a resource for everyone. And so we want you to not only share live, but also later on, anything that is posted from advance. If you would be so kind to help us get the word out to others that you know it would benefit. And tonight we are so honored to have Pastor Carson. He pastors at Calvary Tabernacle there in Indiana. He is also the president of Indiana Bible College, and also leads the school there as well. He is, more importantly, a husband, a father of 4, and we are so grateful for his influence, so grateful for his investment in youth ministry as he served on the national level as the youth president. And in so many areas, he has just invested into so many lives, and I know I am a recipient of that. And I am so grateful, and I'm thankful that he would take the time here tonight to speak in our lives here in the Western District. And we want him to know that we love him, we appreciate him, and we are excited and honored that he would join us tonight. Pastor Carson, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. Man, what a great introduction. I appreciate your kindness, certainly to everyone that's had a part in allowing me to be a part of this this call and this conversation. So many of you that are logged into a Zoom call, I honor you tonight being a part of this, and to your district leadership and the many years of incredible leadership there in your district. So to share with you a little bit tonight, maybe just to get things started in case I've never got the chance to meet you, I do appreciate that introduction. Probably the most important thing about me is that I'm a believer. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus Christ, that he was in fact God manifest in the flesh. And I believe that Jesus Christ is doing incredible things in the church right now. Outside of being a believer, I am a husband to the amazing Rachel and father to the fantastic 4 kids, Canaan, Carver, Cadence, and Cason. And I don't know why we named them so closely. It seemed like a good idea at the time. It seems terrible when we try to yell at one of them through the house. Every parent on here has mixed your kids up, and it kind of becomes whichever one you are. And I say that on a regular basis. And so it's still that way. So my oldest is starting college in the fall. So yeah, I've been doing this for a while. It's hard to even believe, Brother Barker, that's a possibility, but it is the reality. And so I really begin to kind of pray and seek God about what I could talk to you tonight, and doing conversations like this and calls like this and sessions like this on the somewhat regular basis. I try to never just give a open, here's my spiel, but kind of pray and seek God about the topic. And before I get into this, you just announced, Brother Hoffman is going to be speaking in May, and love Brother Hoffman. I have some great moments with him. But the fact that he's going to be next month lets me know I don't need to try to say anything deep, earth-shattering, because you're going to get all the deep stuff next month, okay? So for those of you looking for theological excavations and intricate nuggets from the Word of God that you can turn around and use in your sermons, tune in May 9th. I'm giving a little shout out for May 9th, okay? But I want to talk to you, where I want to get to is talking really about some of the realities of being in ministry. And I think it affects all of us. And so I'll start by telling you a little bit about my life, just personally, what makes me tick. I'm a firm believer that every one of us on here, whether we've been doing ministry for 20 minutes or 20 years, if we don't have daily devotion, we are on our way out the door. And I know for most of you think, oh, Pastor Carson, that's so elementary. I could have heard that anywhere. But I want you to slow down and hear it again. If you can't tell me where you're praying every day, then you're not. If you can't tell me where you spend our time with God every single day, then you're not spending appropriate time with God every day. And as a leader, and for those of you that are either seasoned or especially those of you that are aspiring, I want you to hear very clearly that if the Bible becomes your textbook for your next message, you're treating the Word wrong. The Word is your relational roadmap in daily devotion. So that's a part of who we are. It's our prayer, it's our devotion, it's our time with God, and it's our most valuable time. Now, I'm not going to be one of these people. If your pastor tells you you need to pray at a certain time, then you need to follow and heed that counsel. If you are the pastor, I assume that you have a pastor in your life and you're accountable to them, and you heed that counsel. But the bigger word, I'll tell you the place I think I'm stuck right now is on this word that we might not say enough. It's faithfulness. We need to be faithful. Found faithful, faithful in our prayer, found faithful in our devotion. And so I want to start by telling you that about myself, what I do and where I am. It's important to me that my children know where Dad has devotion. It's important to me that my kids know where they know if I'm sitting in a particular place in the living room early in the morning, they know it's because Dad's in devotion. They know if I'm in the office, they know I'm working. They know I'm not doing devotion in here because I do my devotion in a particular place so that it's known. But after that, I would say a big part of my life that you should know is that relationship with my wife. For everyone on the call that's married. Now, for those of you that are single and you're thinking, well, man, I could have a much more powerful ministry if I was married. You're going to have to deal with those dynamics as they come. But I will tell you this, if you can't be successful single, you won't automatically be successful because you're married. Okay. So some of that starts with that number one step of devotion. But my relationship with my spouse, and those of us that are married on here, some of the young guns that are on here that are all go, 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 go nonstop. I was so challenged by an article written probably nearly 20 years ago now, maybe 15, 17 years ago by Ken Gurley. And the article was titled, "When the Church Becomes the Other Woman." And I was in this season of life, and Brother Quinones, you know, we knew what it was like to be young and gun and do everything you can and live at the church and be nonstop and do all. And I found myself challenged to this reality. If I am a hero anywhere else but not a hero at home, I'm failing. It doesn't matter if I'm a hero at you can even be a hero at your local youth group. And I'll even say you can be a hero assistant pastor to your pastor. But if you're a hero at church, but you're a zero at home, or let's add to that. You're 100% at church, but you're like this 20% dad or 30% mom because of the service at home. So we've got to back that up. And I think all of us need to live by the statement that our family should get the best of our calendar, not the rest of our calendar. And there's a dangerous word in ministry that we let slide in several years ago, and that word is ambition. I don't think ambition belongs in ministry. I think we're supposed to have that call from God, and we're supposed to pursue that call of God under pure accountability with our pastoral leadership and accountability to our spouse and those that are a part of our family. You have integrity that you owe to your spouse and also to your children. So that's a big part of where I'm at. My son had a conversation with me earlier today. I haven't even talked to my wife about it. I have a meeting scheduled on Thursday and did not realize that my son also had something that he was hoping was going to be a personal win for him and I. Somehow it wasn't on my on my calendar. So as I speak to you, I'm in a dilemma right now as to how I win. Where will I be the hero on Thursday? And I think that's always worthy of evaluation. And I think you understand what I mean when I say hero. The next thing, before I get into the text I feel to share and some thoughts here, is the level of accountability in my real life. My best friend is someone that you'd be familiar with out there, and I'll only say his name because you probably know him, and that's Aaron Bounds. Aaron is my best friend. We talk probably daily. And when we talk like normal human beings. You need people in your life all the time that are spiritual and normal. I cannot over stress this, ladies and gentlemen. I've dealt with this for so long, brother Cantrell. I've had plenty of people that when I did meet them, there was this, it was like they couldn't just be a normal person with me. Nobody on this call, when you try to get in the bath, the water parts, no one here is so spiritual that you wake up every day of your, now maybe you do wake up every day talking in tongues, but most of us don't. And the worst thing we could do is have close friends that we cannot be real with. Now, I want to be very clear about this. Being real does not mean that you're not a spiritual person. My best friend and I, we do not have off-color conversations. We don't, because we're being real, talk about topics that we would not feel comfortable about talking in front of other people, and unless they were sensitive in nature and we're helping each other. But you need a friend that is just normal with you. Someone that you can talk about the basic things of life without ever having to substitute the spiritual nature of who you are. I think that's vital. I think it's critical. I rarely preach a message that I don't talk to my best friend about. He rarely has a message that he doesn't talk to me about. And sometimes when I'm talking to him, I tell him my message and he's okay to tell me that doesn't make sense. And I say, well, let me explain it again. And I'll say, does it make sense? And he'll say, not really. And if you know Brother Bounds, he's one of the only ones that can get away with saying, Joshua, I think you need to look at it another way. And you know what I am? I'm good with that, because none of us, someone said, you pastor in Calvary Tabernacle, you were a national leader. You've been preaching for decades now. You know what I am? I'm just normal. I'm just a normal guy that I'm trying to relay a thought, and I need someone in my life that can help me, a friend that is honest enough to tell me the good things and the bad things. And the other thing that he does for me as an accountability partner is he knows he can call me at any time and ask me any question about where I'm at spiritually. To some of you, I know this seems so basic right now, but one of the number one traps I've seen in why ministry does not last is because of this horrific word called isolation. We have friends online, and we have friends at our conferences and friends at our camps. But as far as just deep, personal, one-on-one relationships that we can be truly and extremely vulnerable with no pride, no hubris, I find more and more that those relationships are lacking critically. And we need those relationships. I have multiple close friends I would consider, but my deep, deep friendships, I could tell you honestly, I probably only have a few, but I talk to Aaron almost every single day. And then I have one or two more that weekly we're going to converse just because it's a safeguard for me. So I'll take that and use that maybe as a launching for what I felt to talk about here tonight, and I want to be mindful of our time. In his book, Life-Changing Leadership, a gentleman by the name of Frank Damasio talks about being unstoppable leaders. And he says something even in the opening about being an unstoppable leader is that they have to have these absolutes in their life. Well, we believe that as oneness believers. We're oneness people. We're holiness people. We believe in distinction and separation from the world. But he talks about these absolutes being principles and characteristics from which they will never deviate. And I think we need those. These are the things that he calls those. They have godly character, clarity of their calling. Probably if you're a part of this call, you've already sifted through a lot of what your calling is, or at least you have aspirations to continue to mold what your calling is, in which case you need to hear his third statement, that they invest in the development of their gifting. Some of you are on here, you're excellent communicators, you're great speakers, you're great teachers. I think everyone on this call can understand that just because you're a great speaker does not mean you're a great writer. And yet some of you on here may be great writers and not great speakers. So whatever your gifting is, that comes back to the close people in your life, allowing that, and you developing and investing in the development of your gifting and what your ministry is. Number 4, they work for a depth of knowledge. If you're going to be a leader, you need to be a reader. You need to be a listener. You need to be, you need to do more than surf YouTube to try to craft a message. And I'm not opposed to that medium in our generation. The millennial and the Gen Zs and those below would say you can learn a lot about tips and techniques and tactics of communication, but simply regurgitating what someone else has ministered, the call of God is deeper than that. Number 5, you have to have a genuine love for your church and for your city. Number 6, you have to honor proven principles. I know that there probably are some people on this call that you're super creatives. I like to think of myself as a creative. I enjoy marketing very, very, very much. And so when the creative team is doing something, when I initially built the marketing and creative team at Calvary Tab, and we went into the rebrand, and they said, what are your thoughts? And I said, well, I want to do something called traditional modern. And it seems like a dichotomy at the start, but I love that kind of thing. But at the end of it all, I've got to honor proven principles that do work. So as a creative, and those of you that are creatives, just because, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but just because it's a new idea doesn't mean it's a good idea. And just because it's an old idea doesn't mean it's an outdated idea. Okay, I'm just going to let that marinate for a second, throw that in the crock pot, okay? Now, on the same side, just because it's new doesn't mean it's wrong. And just because it's old doesn't mean it's right. But there are timeless, proven principles that should be considered and should always be followed in regards to ministry. And then the last thing here that he said I want to mention, they're committed and successful as a team builder. If you're going to be successful in ministry, you're going to have to understand you cannot be successful alone. You just cannot be successful alone. My entire ministry, I first went on staff at a church 21 years ago, which seems odd to say out loud. But I came to terms with the fact, finally, by my third team, I lost 2 teams because I was grabbing warm bodies rather than people who were passionate about the ministry. And as we begin to develop teams for Christian education, and then also for youth ministry, and then as it continued to develop, I started to understand the process of developing teams and switching from just disseminating information and delegating obligations, and started getting to the place where we were empowering people. Probably my favorite thing as a leader is to hand out jerseys. I hope that makes sense, that terminology. I like to get other people in the game. I am extremely, extremely passionate about putting young ministers in the microphone, putting aspiring ministers. If you watch Calvary Tabernacle every Sunday night, you're going to hear a young minister in the microphone or an aspiring minister. And usually you're going to see one of them open, and then you're going to see one of them speak for 7 minutes. We do it every Sunday night. And it's not just because we're one of those only churches that still do Sunday night church. It's because we believe in that education opportunity for giving jerseys. But in the teams that we build and the things we do, I came to terms with this a long time ago, and maybe I learned it the hard way. If I had to be everyone's favorite person, then I always had to lead a small group. For those of you that are in ministry or aspiring as ministers, and you're going to be tasked with not just leading, but with building teams eventually, you need to come to terms with this and put this in your mind and your heart, okay? If you can put people around you that can lead with excellence, and they can be people's favorite as well, they don't have to come to me. I don't have to be their favorite person. I'm going to say something right now that might be tough for some of us to grasp. I don't need to be their favorite preacher. I don't need to be their favorite preacher. I don't need to be their favorite teacher. I don't need to be their favorite singer. I don't have to be their favorite leader, but I want to be a part of the guy that is facilitating it. I want to be the guy that is helping when it comes to that particular team. And I hope I'm speaking that clearly enough. I want to build a team that I don't micromanage, but that I empower to lead. Now, that team should always lead my vision. That team should always be very clear in their communication with what I'm saying, but that's what I'm trying to do. So there's so many great leaders from the text that I could point to, but I went to prayer. I honestly, I planned on talking to you about a completely different topic. I really did. But when I was praying, I felt to begin to speak to you a little bit about Saul of Tarsus, the guy we'd call Paul, the tent maker, the great missionary, and we're so well versed. And I don't necessarily want to talk about his relationship with Timothy, which is where I would really on my own typically take a conversation like this with ministers and or aspiring ministers. But I felt really directed to talk to you a little bit about the life of Paul and what's happened to Paul. Now I'm going to read through this list. Okay, these are things that happened in the life of Paul, and I'm going to say these things on purpose to get to where I feel like I'm supposed to really get to. And I won't don't get worried about time. I won't go over time here. But these are tragedies in Paul's life. I want you to think about this successful missionary, this latecomer, this divine revelation gentleman. Here's what he said about himself: that he was in labors more abundant, stripes above measure, prisons more frequently, facing death often. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes, save 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was in the deep. I was in journeys often, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen. I was in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren. He said, I was weary. I felt weariness and toil. I often had sleeplessness, often had hunger, often I dealt with thirst. I would still combat that in often fastings. I found myself in cold and in nakedness. Besides the other things, what comes upon me daily, he said, is my concern for the churches. He said, all of these things I deal with, but this burden for the church. And I want to tell you that if what you endure in life ever begins to elevate itself above your burden for the church, then something spiritually has shifted out of balance. Does that make sense? Am I saying it clear? Give me a couple nods. Okay. If I get to this place where, because so-and-so talked about me, or brother so-and-so had to get on to me, or I've been alienated by this group, or I've been verbally abused by them, if I ever get to a place where I am more consumed by what has come against me than I am consumed by my burden for the lost and for the churches, then somewhere my ego rose above my call. Somewhere my personal comfort got out of balance with the call, because there's not a person on this Zoom tonight that started into ministry when your warm, salty tears saturated the carpet you kneeled on, and you told God that you would do anything that you would have imagined for a moment, that the hardships of life or the personalities of a saint or another believer or some crazy person that was going to talk bad about your children, you never would have believed for a moment that they would have the ability to capsize your call. And yet, as we deal, and every seasoned minister on here can tell you that as you deal with the eroding monotony of ministry, if we're not careful as ministers, we can get into maintenance mode rather than mission mode. We can get to the place where we're trying to just maintain healthy relationships in the church and put fires out and keep everybody happy with us. And if you're on here and you speak through your own love language, right? So whether it's gifts or words or whatever it is, so you will find yourself, if you're not careful, more concerned with being happy than being holy, or with keeping others happy than having a holy ministry. And so you can begin to take your list. Well, I was this and that and abused and neglected. And if we're not careful, we'll say all that, but miss the fact of why I endure this hardship is because my mission, my call of God, it drives me so clearly forward. And so I want to talk to you about a specific moment in Paul's life that you're all very familiar with. And if you'll allow me, I want to read it to you even from the text. When at the end of Acts 27, is kind of this famous moment when they have ran the ship aground. Verse 40 is where I'm reading from, if anyone wants to notate it or follow along. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves to the sea and loosed the rudder bands and hoisted up the mainsail in the wind and made toward shore. And falling into a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the forepart stuck fast and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. The soldiers' counsel was, we've got to kill the prisoners, lest any of them would swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose and commanded that they which could swim would be cast themselves first into the sea and get to land, and the rest of them, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. And this is a miraculous moment, and we've preached of it. I've preached from it. Probably every person on this call has preached or taught from this, and grabbing a hold of the wreckage and making it to the shore. But I want to talk about the insult to injury that we've also all taught from, because I think this is a very clear look at ministry. The start of 28, when they were escaped, then they knew that the island was called Melita. And the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire. They received us every one because of the present rain and because of the cold. I've always said that's the dynamics of ministry that ministers and aspiring ministers need to know. Why did they start a fire? Because they were cold and they were wet. Thank God those people were willing to help them. Some things are spiritual, but some things are just practical. We all better grasp that. Some things are spiritual, but some things are practical. But here it is. When Paul gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. When the barbarians saw that venomous beast hang on his hand, they said among themselves, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he hath escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffereth not to live. And his action has been the thing of legendary preaching for all these years. He shook off the beast into the fire, and he felt no harm. Here's my question, and this is what I really felt when I was praying about this particular meeting. And I don't know that I've ever asked this to someone, but I'm going to ask those that are on this call because I felt prompted to in prayer. What does the post-bite version of you look like? What does the post-bite version of your ministry look like? Because that needs to be settled right now, because if somehow you have not been bitten yet, it's coming.
That's right.
Come on, help me, elders, on here right now. I don't want to get preachy here, but if you've not been bitten, brace yourself, because you are going to be bitten. As if the beating was not enough, as if the shipwreck was not enough, as if you got to come up onto the shore soggy, as if, and it seems like at some point you're thinking enough is enough. And immediately, wasn't it amazing? Immediately in that moment, now these people that were just so kind, one verse before, these people are so kind. All it took was one bite for them to change their opinion before his reaction. They had already changed their opinion before his reaction. We know they're going to recant. They're going to say, oh, wow, maybe he's a God himself. We know they're going to recant based on his actions, which leads me to tell everyone on this call right now that's called to ministry, people are way, way less concerned with what happens to you and way more concerned with how you react to what happens to you. This may sound elementary to some, but this, I believe, is from the Lord for someone to hear this right now. Please hear me right now. People are going to talk about you. Not everyone's going to love you. I don't care how lovable you are. Not everyone's going to love you. There will be a venomous beast that will come up out of the fire. And I have found typically it happens during times of good fire, but something is going to try to latch onto you. It might be an attack against your children. It might be an attack against your marriage. It might be an attack against your character, which if you want to watch closely, the immediate words of those barbarian, those people, it was an attack against his character immediately just by watching the action. And there was an immediate character assassination that was coming his way, but his reaction, man, I feel so prompted. I don't know who this is for on this call, but his reaction was everything. He didn't have to get on the phone. He didn't have to call all the people around and say, tell all the things you've seen me do before. Well, come here and speak on my behalf. No, he just shook the beast off into the fire, not making a great big deal about it, allowing it to minister to the current context that he was dealing with and the present audience. When God does something miraculous in your life and he gives you a sustaining victory like he did for Paul, you don't have to shout it from the rooftops. Shake the beast off. Don't give the beast any more credit than he deserves. Shake it off into the fire. For the love of God, do not get on Facebook and defend yourself. I feel very prompted to say that right now. Do not get in some war for territory. That is not your fight. The mission is your fight. The goal of why you were called in the first place. We're not fighting for our little kingdoms. We're not fighting for our little identities. We're fighting for the kingdom of God. So do not allow this distraction to be a long-term thing. And watch how quickly their opinion turns. He shakes it off in the fire. And I know normally when we talk about this, we're preaching and we want to talk about Pentecostal fire and things like that. And I'm not downplaying that, but in the text, it shows that it had become for Paul, everything was second to the mission. When Paul would finally go out of this life, he was going to go on his own terms in the timing that God had established. And so the very next thing that takes place with this is that it comes to pass, verse 8, that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever. When Paul entered in, he prayed, he laid hands upon him. I used to preach a message from this text where I talked about it, and so it's in my mind, so maybe I'll even share it tonight. I would love to have a painted canvas of the maybe the candlelit room where this father is laying sick, and the outstretched hand with those fresh bite marks in Paul's hand lay hands upon this father, and there's prayer that's made, and all of a sudden a healing comes. Healing comes through someone who was supposed to be wounded. And here's what I felt for this night, for what it's worth. You can either let the bite stop you, and you can decide that you endured all of this abuse, the shipwreck, the beating, the flogging, the pain, the trial. You can decide that you endured all that for nothing, for one measly viper on a crazy little island. Or you can decide, I'm going to shake this off and I'm going to move forward, because if God put me on this island, he probably put me on this island for a reason. And I feel like there's people on this call right now, you feel like you're on an island, and I need you to hear me. If he's got you on an island and you're sincerely following the will of God, then he's got you on that island for a reason. And it's probably because there's a ministry opportunity there for this season. It might not be forever, but I don't know how we ever sail on until we do the ministry that this island is desperately needing. And we can't see it happen, Paul, if you let the viper be the end. And so I would just speak to somebody tonight and tell you that the bite that either you're enduring or you're about to endure does not have the ability to destroy you unless you allow it. Be resilient in your calling. Don't get caught up in the monotony. Be committed to the ministry and to the mission. Amen. Let me relinquish the floor so we can do some Q&A. But
Well, Carson, man, great stuff, man. You could have kept on going for a long time. I think everybody's been so captivated. We haven't even gotten direct questions in. I think they're just waiting for more. Man, great stuff. I'm still digesting, but you talked about, of course, a lot of things tonight, but one question we asked all of our speakers, when it comes to books, and you were talking about it in the beginning, for those that are new into ministry, I know there's a huge variety of material out there, but what are some books, some reading material that you've read and would be a benefit to new ministers and wives coming into ministry?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Depending on where you're at in ministry and what you're doing, I think one great thing to make sure you're doing is reading on apostolic doctrine. So I'm a David K. Bernard fan in his writing. We've read that new into ministry, making sure, because if you're going to be attacked in ministry, especially as a young minister, typically the attack is going to come on doctrine, belief, and standard, and where you stand and how you're able to articulate it. And so I love reading about that. A newer work that he's done more recently, the Apostolic Church in Postmodern World. That's a great book for somebody that's newer to ministry right now. I will I want to say this because I think it's important even for maybe some younger ministers to read it, but even veterans alike. If you haven't read Wayne Cadero's work, Leading on Empty, that's a book I wish everybody had in your library, talking about how we treat our personal time, what we do. The great late Norman Pasley sent me a book some 9 years ago now, and called Addicted to Busy. I think Wayne Cadero's book, Leading on Empty, there's several books like that, but for me and for a lot that I'm connected to, the way that it spells it out is almost unparalleled. And so I would highly encourage you to do that. When it comes, maybe if I just share a couple other books, Brother Bark, if that's okay, maybe just in regards to how personal living. I think one thing that every person, if you're going to be in ministry and you're going to endure the bites, I think LaHaye's book on spirit-controlled temperament is something to look at. It's something that I keep in my arsenal. It's always close around me when it comes to study and how you prepare for a message. So I maybe new school and old school, I do a Logos and a lot of online work. But I love some commentary stuff. I'm a fan of Wearsby stuff. I love the Teach the Text. If you're not aware of the Teach the Text series, it's a discontinued series now, but you can still get them online. Incredible in-depth look at the text, and then also for personal application in the way that you teach. A lot of the way I teach and preach, I'm a narrative preacher. So most of the time, if I'm preaching, I'm telling the story. I don't bounce around a whole lot. If I start talking about Acts 27, 28 and that journey of the shipwreck, and that you'll follow most of my preaching, I'm going to stay on that same story. I don't do a lot of topical preaching where I tie around. I do some, but so I utilize resources like that to fully juice the text. And so I feel like I'm giving kind of an a la carte splatter maybe of some books. My emphasis in my master's program was counseling. So I have a grand host of books on counseling. And maybe my biggest word, let me do this real quick. Mm-hmm. Just because you're a minister does not mean you're a counselor. I just want to save a bunch of people on here that maybe you're going to end up being a pastor. I need you to know, I believe we did ourselves a disservice a long time ago when we thought and came up with the idea that pastor and professional counselor were synonymous with each other. They are not. You need to know how to recommend your people to professional Christian, hopefully even apostolic counselors. But at the end of the day, we all need to be aware of this. Truly, there's one counselor and he's wonderful. And the greatest thing we can do is facilitate healthy conversations to get people into communication with the wonderful counselor. And we may need to do that through some clinical work and practical. But being a pastor does not mean you have to be a counselor. Get some good books, but more than that, get some good referrals.
Good, great advice. As you were talking at the close and talking about the bite, a question that came in was, once you have been bitten, what does going forward look like? What's the process? Is it jump right in, or are there practical things that somebody should do to recover in a systematic way to help them get back on track? What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, such a great question. I think one of the worst things we can do is not acknowledge the fact we've been bitten. If I don't acknowledge the bite, I don't shake off the viper in the first place. Part of the shake off is the acknowledgement. I have to acknowledge that I've been bitten. And to acknowledge that I've been bitten, it probably means it's visible to the closest people around me. Now, allow me to use the circumstance here. The closest people around him, whatever shipmates were there and whatever barbarous people were there, they're there, and so they see it. The closest people to you will know that you've been bitten. Your reaction, for me, I've been bitten. Man, I've been bitten. I've endured it. I have found that my I'm guarded. I've got a spouse. I can tell my spouse. I will tell you, I don't vent everything to my spouse because I'm also trying to keep her from being bit. But I do have people in my life. I keep personally in my life. This is my own conviction. I keep an apostle, a prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher in my life at all times to keep me well-rounded. These are men that I stay connected to, and that are a covering for my life. And so I have that covering, and then I have my best friend and then the close friends. And so the way that I recover is through acknowledgement, prayer, healthy conversation about the situation. And then I use these words. And again, my friend really introduced these words to me, because starting many years ago, Aaron would call me and he would say, I need you to judge me on this. Now, we're not very good with that language overall as people. I understand that. But that's the language we use. If I've been bitten, if I've been hurt, if I've got to make a decision, I'm going to use those words to my closest friend and to my very closest, very limited comrades after I've talked to the Lord and prayed. I need you to judge me on this. This is what's occurred. This is how I'm feeling. How do I minister effectively? And sometimes the minister needs ministered to.
But Carson, thank you again so very much. Great stuff, man. And we're excited. We haven't announced this, but Brother Carson is actually going to be one of our keynote speakers at our advanced retreat in December. And we are really, really looking forward to him being here in person in California. And we are excited.